Okay, chapter 20. This is a really confusing chapter. It's also a chapter that I think teachers might really hit you hard with a lot of random quiz questions. This entire chapter is narrated by Sethe. And just pretend like you're going for a walk. And as you're walking, your mind is wandering and you're thinking about conversations you've had with people, things you'd like to tell people, memories that you sort of narrate to yourself. That's what she's doing here. Many times in my notes, I have, just to remind you, this is stream of consciousness writing. This is something you'll encounter again. I'm thinking the most obvious choice would be Virginia Woolf. She's also really well known for that sort of writing style. So this is all Sethe, just like coming to terms with the fact that Beloved is living with her. Like, oh my gosh, my daughter is here. She can't believe it, obviously. What's interesting to me is that Denver has known this whole time. We have known as a reader this whole time, and Sethe has not. And I think it's interesting to think about, like, why might it be that Denver is more aware of the connection between Beloved and the baby ghost, and Sethe has finally, at this point, figured it out. So it starts off with her thinking that maybe baby Suggs sent the ghost into the house, that Paul D, when he came, he chased the ghost away, and then that's when Beloved showed up. She also says, that she's going to explain to Beloved why she did what she did, that if she hadn't killed her in the shed and, she would have gone back to Sweet Home and she would have died there. I think this is it's worth asking, how is that any different? Either way, she's dead. But in this situation, she dies as a free child on her mother's property versus maybe being taken back into slavery and eventually dying either because of neglect or because she's beaten. So this is just an interesting parallel. Then her mind just wanders into what it was like when she was a child, how, she hadn't been fed by her mother. I mean, obviously, Sethe is really happy that she can feed her own children, but she wasn't fed by her own mother. She was fed instead by Nan, who was the nurse. The nurse would take care of the white babies first, and then the black infants would get whatever milk was left from Nan. She's was technically called a wet nurse, somebody who was really, her job was to keep her milk going so she could nurse children. There are still wet nurses today, interestingly enough. Some parts of the country, people do still hire a wet nurse. So this whole section, she is weaving the past and the present. She's thinking about how she took care of Mrs. Garner in the same way she would have taken care of her own mother when she was on Sweet Home. And then she remembers a lot about that. She thinks about the fact that when her mother was killed, she didn't have time to look for the sign. Remember her mother, this was earlier in another chapter, Sethe's mother told her that this was the mark on her skin that would identify her, the branding. She doesn't have time to look at that, but her mother was killed. That is a fact. Then she says that now that Beloved is with her, she can look at things and be happy to see them. She has joy. She is excited about spring. She understands that baby Suggs was pondering color because she also needed some joy in her life. And so this whole section is sort of weaving together this idea that, she finally can think about the future now that Beloved is there with her. She can imagine growing a garden with the girls in the spring and things like that. That's what all of this is about. Then we have her remembering Amy. Remember, Amy is the white girl who delivered Denver, and she starts thinking about the colors that she associates with Amy, like her gray eyes, and then Mrs. Garner's had light brown eyes, but they got darker when she was sick. So there's just a lot of memories about what Mrs. Garner used to call her. She would tell Sethe that she used to be as strong as a mule, which is, interesting. Sethe remembers that the two of them could saw wood together. They were strong women together, and it wasn't until Mrs. Garner got sick that suddenly, she couldn't do anything but lay in bed. A few times, Sethe wonders whether or not Mrs. Garner lasted. And I think not all of us now, understanding modern medicine, it sounds like she had probably some sort of terrible tumor, something cancerous. I think we can assume that she did not last. If she was unable to get out of bed when Sethe left, I think we can assume that Mrs. Garner eventually died. But she remembers hearing shots. So somebody was getting killed. This would be school teacher, most likely shooting, perhaps one of the slaves. And then she remembers how she heard the woman's rattle. So this is a shift. We're not talking about Mrs. Garner anymore. And so this is what's difficult about this chapter, is her mind is jumping from Amy to Mrs. Garner and all of a sudden to the woman's rattle. The woman's rattle was the signal that it was time to escape, that the train was coming. They were going to meet the train and get out of the South. And so when she hears that rattle, she knows that she has to go, that she can't wait anymore. And so this is when Sethe decides to send her children ahead of her because she doesn't feel she can leave yet. And it was that night or the next day that she is whipped. So this is, there's some terrible details here we haven't seen yet. Literally how school teacher and the boys dug a hole so that when they laid Sethe on her stomach to be whipped, there was a place for the baby to be, which is just a horrible image. And how they split open her back. So remember, this is the tree on her back, all the terrible scars from being whipped. And then literally, a couple days later, she runs away in that terrible condition. Then she has a new memory. Again, just a random memory about being with her baby beloved on Sweet Home by the grape arbor, how they ran there, that there were flies there, that there was sun on beloved's face. And then she remembers the time that beloved actually showed up at Sweet Home at 124, and how she saw her sitting on the stump, and how suddenly she had to go to the bathroom so badly and she peed so much, which is just like the same idea of her water breaking. So there's just all this. These are all things that we've already read about in this book. This is new, though I think there may be some earlier references to it that are very vague. But she says, otherwise, I would have seen my fingernail prints right there on your forehead for all the world to see. So she says that because Paul D was there and distracting her, she didn't recognize that when beloved actually showed up at the house, that there were little fingerprint scars on her head. And so this is another horrible image. This was the way that Sethe held baby beloved, like in her hands, like held her head and then caught her neck when she killed her. So those fingerprints are how she held her from her forehead, which is just another horrible image. So I think what's striking about this is we have so many beautiful memories juxtaposed every few lines with just horrific images. I mean, that's just horrible. Then she remembers about the earrings, and then she says, but gosh, she remembers Paul D, who said that her love was too thick. What does he know about it? Who in the world is he willing to die for? Legitimate question, for sure. Would he give his privates to a stranger in return for a carving? Some other way, he said. There must have been some other way. Well, we do know he was having sex with beloved. So, she's challenging in her mind, how dare he judge her for what she did? Because the alternative was to go back to slavery. She says that there was no way she was going to be any place without her children. I told baby Suggs that, and she got down on her knees to beg God pardon for me. Still, it's so. My plan was to take us all to the other side where my own mam is. They stopped me from getting us there, but they didn't stop you from getting here. So like she was hoping to go back maybe to Africa, or maybe like, oh no, I'm sorry, that's not what's happening at all. She's saying here, see, it's confusing. She's saying here that her plan had been to kill all of them, that she was going to kill herself and Beloved and Howard and Bugler, kill all of them, because the alternative was Sweet Home. So her plan was to go to the other side, meaning heaven, where her mother was. So my plan was to kill us all, basically. But that didn't happen. And so this is interesting. She's kind of like feeling like a winner here. You came right on back like a good girl, like a daughter, which is what I wanted to be and would have been if my ma'am had been able to get out of the rice long enough before they hanged her and let me be one. So like Sethe never got to be a daughter, but she gets to be a mother, and she has her daughters now to take care of, which is like an improvement on what her mother experienced. Then she has a memory of her mother, that she had the bit so many times that she smiled. So remember, Paul D had the bit. They put it in your mouth like it's like a bridle almost, and it pulls their mouth and makes it all swollen. It's a way to lead them like animals. Even when she wasn't smiling, she smiled. So because of that swelling and all the damage it did to her mouth, Sethe's mother always looked like she was smiling. She was my ma'am, and nobody's ma'am would run off and leave her daughter, would she? Would she now? So it sounds like her mother was going to run off and leave her because she got caught, and that's why she was hung. But Sethe doesn't want to believe that. She wouldn't leave her in the yard with a one-armed woman. That would be Nan, who was the one who took care of the babies. It sounds like, yes, she would have. Even if she hadn't been able to suckle the daughter for more than a week or two and had to turn her over to another woman's tit that never had enough for all, that's Nan again. They said it was the bit that made her smile when she didn't want to, like the Saturday girls working the slaughterhouse yard. So this is a reference to the present time, that there are girls that hang around the slaughterhouse on the weekend, and we can assume that they are prostitutes if they're smiling back there. When I came out of jail, I saw them playing, these prostitutes. They came when the shift changed on Saturday, when the men got paid and worked behind the fences. So they would, when the men had money, then they would hook up with these prostitutes behind the outhouse, is what she's remembering. Then she thinks about how some of them drank liquor to keep from feeling what they felt, just because it's like horrible to be a prostitute. Some didn't drink a drop. They just beat it on over to Phelps to pay for what their children needed or their mammies. Working a pig yard, that has got to be something for a woman to do. And I got close to it myself when I got out of jail and bought, so to speak, your name. But the Bodwins got me the cooking job at Sawyer and left me able to smile on my own, like now when I think about you. So just remembering, she could have, when she got out of jail, gone and worked at the pig yard like the other women. She had sex with a man so that he would carve Beloved on the headstone of her dead baby. And then she was fortunate to get hired by the Bodwins to cook, which is why she didn't have to work in the pig yard or become a prostitute, and why she's actually smiling, especially now, because Beloved is there. So that's what all that is about. But then she says, in her head, she's talking to Beloved, you know all of that because you're smart, like everybody said, because when I got here, you were crawling already. Remember when she arrived after escaping slavery, the first thing Baby Suggs said is, she's crawling already. Trying to get you up the stairs, Baby Suggs had them painted white so that you could see your way to the top in the dark where lamplight didn't reach. Lord, you love the stair steps. I got close to being a Saturday girl. I had already worked a stonemason's shop, meaning like basically using sex to get money so she could have the carving, the engraving, and the headstone. A step to the slaughterhouse would have been a short one. When I put that headstone up, I wanted to lay in there with you, put your head on my shoulder and keep you warm. And I would have if Howard and Bugler in Denver didn't need me, because my mind was homeless then. When you don't have a child, you don't have a home. I couldn't lay down with you then No matter how much I wanted to, I couldn't lay down nowhere in peace back then, but now I can. I can sleep like the drowned. Have mercy. She come back to me, my daughter, and she is mine. So all of this, and just, I think it's important that Toni Morrison took the time to take us through Sethe's thinking, because for how long we are into this book, page 241, she's finally realized her daughter is with her. So all of this is just to take us through like her leaping thoughts, really. She's very happy. She's thinking about her past. She has some regrets. She has questions about her own mother and about her relationship with Mrs. Garner. It's natural that now that she gets to be a mother again to Beloved, that she would think about those other women in her life. So take your time with this. Definitely go through and, try to mark some of these details about like what happened to Sethe's mom. She was probably running away and then she got hung. Why was Sethe able to see the mark on her mother's body? No, she was not, because Nan took her away. So just sort of go through all this stuff, pick up some of these details, zoom in and look at some of the things that I highlighted. And we'll move on to chapter 21 tomorrow.